Depending on how you look at them, franchises can be a good or a bad thing in video games. On one hand, it allows developers a chance to expand on worlds they and their players love, while also offering a chance to go back and refine the ideas that made them so appealing in the first place. On the other hand, it can be an excuse for less scrupulous publishers to run an otherwise good idea into the ground. Either way, if you get big enough in this industry, eventually things are going to slip through the cracks. You're going to develop a game under a big name that people just don't seem to notice. Not even your ad team if the other games are selling well enough. With that said, I'd like to shed some light on some of the more interesting titles in this category, and maybe help you see some of your favorite characters in a whole new way. Just one stipulation though. No ports. Even though I love the hell out of the Game Boy version of Contra Alien Wars, it feels like a cheat to include titles that are simply different versions of other games, rather than totally unique experiences in their own right. So pull up Amazon in another tab and get ready to add a few things to your wish list, because these are Team Pizza's top 8 obscure games from famous franchises. Number 8. If you're a hardcore collector, 3 words that'll send shivers down your wallet's spine are Panzer Dragoon Saga. This is one of those titles that's become synonymous with good games that are impossible to find, especially in box. And it's because of this legacy that most people tend to forget how good the other games are, despite their lower price tag. But only one of them allows you to take your dragon blasting adventures on the go. Jump for joy, Game Gear fans! Here comes Panzer Dragoon Mini. Aside from some fairly minimalistic backgrounds, Mini is pretty much everything you'd want out of a Panzer Dragoon game. You shoot down ships, fight bosses, use the lock-on when you can, and you even have 2 different dragons to choose from, each with different abilities. Plus, true to the rest of the series, Panzer Dragoon Mini can get pretty tricky later on. Yeah, this is one of those truly old-school games, where the reward is in itself getting better at it, so you can see all the new challenges it throws at you down the road. Even the music is pretty kick-ass for Game Gear standards. Add that to a password system to help you navigate the 3 different difficulty levels, and chances are you're gonna get your money's worth from this one. Now, it did only come out in Japan, but because the Game Gear is region free, and because the game itself is so simple to understand to begin with, don't let that stop you from giving it a shot. Quick side note though, Panzer Dragoon Mini almost made it onto one of my previous countdowns about the top 8 games where you play as a dragon. As for the other 2 on that short list, yeah, we'll get to those eventually. Number 7! Console accessories are usually in a weird position where people tend to remember the gimmick rather than anything that was attached to it. Nobody looks at the 32X and immediately thinks of Knuckles' Chaotix, is all I'm saying. Sure enough, Nintendo wasn't immune to this mentality either, meaning while a whole lot of people remember the Super Scope, not many people remember the games that could be played with it. Not even ones with flagship characters. I mean, come on, it's Yoshi! What could possibly be putting you guys off? Princess? You alright, lass? You're looking awfully pale over there. Also, you want a sandwich or something? Your hips are half the width of your head. Even Mario seems shocked by how unhealthy she looks. Also, speaking of Mario, where the hell did you get a bazooka? Everyone always jokes about a Mario first-person shooter, but that's basically what Yoshis Safari is, and it's surprisingly enjoyable. Blasting Paragoombas and Koopas out of the air and watching them explode into coins is immensely satisfying. Power-ups are also abound, as you'd expect. You can't hurt me! Suck it! Each of the 12 levels also has multiple paths to go down, each with their own challenges and prizes, as well as the occasional mini-boss. After you beat Bowser, there's even a new Game Plus mode that'll change the dialogue and the difficulty of the stages, so for something made to sell a peripheral, there's quite a lot of game here. There was even a manga of Yoshis Safari, and let me just say, this cover alone is one of the most awesome Mario anythings I've ever seen. Glad to see Peach clean herself up for the comic, at least. And fun fact, this was actually the first time she was ever referred to as Princess Peach. Not sure why that is. Then again, there's not even a credits sequence to tell us who worked on this thing, so maybe everyone was just trying to hide the fact that they were a part of this game. Now isn't that weird? Nintendo was so confident in Yoshi's Safari, they greenlit a printed version of the story, yet the dev team didn't want anybody knowing who they were. There are so many weird little details about this game that its very existence is fascinating. But if you still aren't convinced it's worth a go, I leave you with this. Bowser in a mech suit. You're welcome. Number 6. This is a 2-for-1. Not only is the game obscure, but so is the console you play it on. I hear literally no one talking about the Neo Geo Pocket these days, and even less so about its color variant. Yet, its library was incredible, boasting everything from Magical Drop and Metal Slug to Evolution. Not to mention that, just like the original Game Boy, it was also forwards compatible, meaning it could also play Neo Geo color games, just in black and white. But of course, this is SNK we're talking about, and no console they ever touched would be complete without at least one fighting game. And the best one on the Neo Geo Pocket by far is known as Gal's Fighters. I'm not even being facetious. As far as retro consoles go, this cartoony, all-girl fan service game is the finest portable fighter I've ever played. The control is what seals the deal. Unlike most modern consoles, this pocket-sized 8-bit brick runs at a consistent 60 FPS. Not that you can tell on YouTube. This ensures that every single input counts, and you never feel cheated out of victory. Every character feels radically different from the others, boasting combos and special moves that'll actually cause you to rethink your approach at the start of every match. Not to mention, it's just fun. It's got that very Capcom Pocket Fighters feel to it, where the attacks have overblown and exaggerated effects, the characters can don different costumes. I mean, come on! Leona can call in an airstrike with one of her supers. How awesome is that? Not to mention that sense of humor extends into the writing as well. The whole premise of this tournament is around a medallion that can grant any wish. And when you give that kind of power to people like Mai Shiranui and Athena, let's just say that things can only go downhill. Add that to the final boss actually being Iori in the worst disguise ever, and you're in for one wild ride. Both Gal's Fighters and the Neo Geo Pocket are totally worth trying out for yourself, and they're incredibly cheap to boot. In fact, I'd say the only downside to this console is you can't play Pokemon on it. Just make sure you're ready to put up with that non-backlit screen. Number 5. As a child, the extent of my PC gaming experiences went about as far as Jumpstart 3rd grade and piloting a helicopter through any email that would send one to me. So imagine my surprise when I visited my friend who was primarily a PC gamer and found out that I had a, shall we say, hilariously limited view of the field. Before that day, I had never even heard of games like StarCraft, Duke Nukem, and Ski Free. But my favorite by far that he had was good old Jazz Jackrabbit. And please, cut me some slack on passing over Korea's national pastime for a cartoon rabbit. I mean, come on, the first game I ever owned on the first console I ever owned was Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World. Like, you think I'm gonna gravitate towards platformers? But alas, that sleepover had to end eventually, and until the advent of DOSBox, I would never touch these games in their original forms again. But until that point, I had a little help from a local used game store to get the memories flooding back. For you see, you may be familiar with the character, but I don't think you've ever seen him like this. Don't let the redesign fool you. The GBA Jazz Jackrabbit is a solid platformer. It's a game of methodical movement, hunting down secrets, and gunning down every single reptile you see. But in its new environment, it's also a game of fleshed out characters, intelligent enemies, and hidden nooks and crannies whose rewards actually feel worth sniffing out. It even has Jazz's trademark ability to only see 2 feet in front of his face and not give the player enough time to react to hazards. There's a pretty decent soundtrack in this game as well. Not as good as Jazz 2, mind you, but still catchy and upbeat in its own right. In fact, just about everything in this game isn't comparable to Jazz 2, but bear in mind, you can take it with you wherever you go, which I readily did whenever my family went on a road trip. Then again, we are in an era where you could probably emulate Jazz 2 on your smartphone, so that's a bit of a moot point, isn't it? Silly technology, nostalgia's for old people. Number 4! If there's anything I learned in 2006, is that was a bad year to try and reboot a franchise. Not only did we get Sonic on the Xbox and all the fallout that came with that, but we got Metal Slug in 3D. So, okay, there are plenty of third-person shooters out there that are good. Maybe this can work out. How do we capture the non-stop, arcadey, run-and-gun action that defined Metal Slug and transfer that into 3D? Well, how about a new gun type that takes advantage of the new camera by making you stand perfectly still? How about we give players access to every single type of special weapon at once, and an incredibly limiting way of cycling through them? And you know what Metal Slug always needed? That one crucial thing that it was just never complete without? Cutscenes. 3-minute long ones. At the beginning and end of every mission. This game needs to be seen to be believed. Metal Slug 3D dropped the ball so badly it broke its own foot with it. You can complain about region exclusivity all you want, but just remember that sometimes there are reasons a game never leaves the Japanese market. In fact, let's count a few of them, shall we?
What? Mission time? They've opened fire on us. Talk about trigger happy.
Number 3! What started as an in-joke at a company that thought it was going bankrupt at the time has now become one of the most ironically named franchises in the industry. By now, this fantasy is anything but final, as evidenced by the fact that including spin-offs and mobile games, we're at over 70 titles under the brand so far. But those side games are where things start to get really interesting. This is where the team can toy with new ideas, approach the style, characters, and common tropes in a new light, and put a fresh spin on the concepts that made people gravitate to the series in the first place. Imagine a Final Fantasy dungeon crawler where you played as a chocobo. Imagine a real-time combat Final Fantasy with multiplayer. Imagine a retro-style fantasy where you brought all the characters together into one super team, trekking across all their previous adventures together. Now imagine a literal tower defense game where you play as the bad guy. My Life as a Dark Lord immediately scores bonus points with me because it's a direct sequel to My Life as a King, which in itself is set from the world of Crystal Chronicles, one of my favorite games of all time. Games that let you control the villain are always a refreshing and interesting change of pace. Well, okay, most of the time they're interesting. And while it handles the premise in a very cartoony and possibly silly way, there is still that joyfully wicked satisfaction of hearing an adventurer's horrified scream as they're literally sent flying from your tower. It's also worth noting how incredibly well-balanced and deeply strategic Malad actually is. Just as an example, there's a mechanic where only one adventurer can be on any floor of your tower at any given time. The problem you face there is that they won't always come at you by themselves, causing some characters to skip right over your lower floors and take on challenges later down the path. This is incredibly dangerous because you not only have a limited number of floors to work with, but obviously you also have a limited number of resources to build them in the first place, so it becomes this incredible metagame of trying to lay out your tower so that skips don't happen, that the battles on floor 1 always end after the battles on floor 2, so that the first adventurer always takes the maximum amount of damage. And like Plants vs. Zombies, because you always start every level with a new setup, the challenges can be crafted in such a way as to always keep you on your toes. Just when you think you can relax, it'll throw a party of 3 mages your way, and your immediate response is, no! However, there is one thing I cannot forgive this game for, the one thing that might have caused a lot of people to pass it up. You cannot sell or remove structures. Once you place a floor or monster, they are stuck there until they die. If you can get past that though, I cannot recommend My Life as a Dark Lord enough. It's full of fun mechanics, recognizable characters, and microtransactions.
Number 2.
Alright, let's get serious for a second. Something I think we need to start taking into consideration as a community is the idea of preservation. I don't mean to scare anybody, but when it's easier to read an entire library worth of classic literature online than it is to legally study an Atari 2600 game in its original form, something has gone wrong. Luckily, I'm not the only one to think of this, as sites like DOS Games Archive, Unseen64, and Archive.org have shown. Thanks to their efforts, games like Mappy, The Elder Scrolls Arena, Warcraft Orcs and Humans, and the original NES Glider prototype that eventually became Star Fox can all be enjoyed by anyone. But there's another site out there that, while not as famous, has preserved one of the most overlooked parts of the art form. They're called Pika-Pic, and they've digitally recreated many of the handheld LCD games released in the 80s and 90s. This covers everything from Game & Watch games like Octopus and Parachute to some of the Tiger games like Bartman and the Terminator. And it gives those old games a functionality their old forms could never have: online high-score leaderboards. Yes! But their crowning achievement is a Nintendo game I bet you had never even heard of until now. If you don't watch Did You Know Gaming, that is. Way to steal my thunder, guys. Like Ocarina of Time is hailed as one of the best, if not the best, N64 game ever made, I'm gonna come out and say that Zelda LCD is the finest title in its format. Most of us are familiar with how these kinds of games work. They're always very simple, which admittedly is part of their charm. They usually require you to navigate a character from one point to another, or, if the devs were feeling really creative, have you navigate a character that has to transport something from one point to another. Some even feature basic forms of combat, and this is where Zelda LCD shines. In typical Zelda fashion, you are playing as Link in a dungeon. Every room requires that you defeat a moblin before you can progress. To do this, you run up and start hitting him with your sword, but keep an eye on the Stalfos below. They'll try to stab upwards through the floor to hit you, so you end up having to play a delicate game of attacking the moblin, avoiding the Stalfos, and keeping your shield up long enough so that the arrows the moblin shoots don't damage you either. Now, here's where things get interesting. Moblins might drop items when you defeat them, and this can be anything from a dungeon map to a water of life that you can actually hold on to and use whenever you're low on health, to an axe that does more damage than your sword and can make the boss battle at the end much easier. You heard me right, there's a boss in this game, and this dragon is going to require some seriously good timing on your part to beat. And the craziest thing about this, unlike most LCD games, The Legend of Zelda has a win condition. Every time you beat the dragon, you get a piece of the Triforce, giving you an incentive to try just one more time to see if you can complete the quest. It even gives you the sword beam if your health is full, making using the Water of Life a question of, do I want to make the normal enemies easier or save it for when I'm low and really need it? There's an unbelievable amount to see here for an LCD game, and you can play it for free right now by clicking the link I've provided in the description. I even went through the trouble of setting the high score for this month, so if you can beat me, let me know in the comments that my throne has been challenged, and the game, as they say, will be on.
It's number 1.
For centuries, mankind has stood united in a singular purpose, a unified goal that our species strives to reach, the zenith upon which all of our lives will finally become completed. This is to finally get a true third Banjo-Kazooie game. To once again collect jigsaw pieces, scrounge for notes, and do battle with the wicked witch of the wasted potential once more. Well, fear not, my children, for the promised day has finally arrived. The day you shall once again know the rapturous harmony of bear and bird. Most of you are just 12 years late to the party. Why do I never hear anyone mentioning Gruntys Revenge? It's the best Rareware game you've never played. It revolves around this plot that happens between the first and second games, placing Gruntilda in a mechanical body that she magically infused with her soul. And believe it or not, that's the least crazy thing in this entire game. She then kidnaps Kazooie and jumps through time to try and get Banjo to never meet his winged companion. And of course, you need notes and jiggies to stop her. The levels and characters are full of personality, the soundtrack is pure Grant Kirkhope, the humor is spot on, there are puzzles, mini-games, platforming challenges, tons of classic moves to learn, and even some new toys to play with, like the electric eggs. Mumbo Jumbo got an upgrade, sporting the ability to transform you into any form you've previously unlocked at any of his locations, and his new transformations like the candle are a blast to control. Gruntys Revenge also benefits from being a portable game, because this keeps the levels from ever feeling too long or wearing out their welcome. It always feels like something new is happening in this game, which is essential for keeping the player interested in collecting the same items again and again. It's everything we love about Banjo-Kazooie through and through, and it certainly deserves to be far less obscure than it is. So please, if you just can't wait for Yooka-Laylee or a Hat in Time to help you scratch that decade-old itch for a good collectathon, Banjo-Kazooie Gruntys Revenge is right up your alley. Hey guys, if you had fun watching this, please let me know by clicking that big green thumb below, and consider checking out last week's countdown as well about 8 of our most realistic predictions for E3 2015. Also, know any other games I should have mentioned? Well, my short list also included Mega Man Soccer, Sonic Jam, Pack and Roll, Ape Escape Pumped and Primed, DK Jungle Climber, and Final Fight Revenge, but if that's still missing your suggestion, please let me know all about it in the comments. We also have a gameplay channel if that's your kind of thing, where we're currently messing around in another Metroid 2 remake, as well as doing a full playthrough of Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance, and lastly, please consider subscribing so you can catch the new countdowns I upload every single weekend. I'll even give you a hint about next week's topic. It has to do with Nintendo. Until then, I'm Whatthefnu. Later, everybody!